Coming to you entirely pre-recorded from the Garage of Solitude here in Whitestone, Queens, I am Mario-Francisco Robles, and this is episode 3 of the Superman on Film podcast. I've been looking forward to this one for a while, folks, since long before I even launched this show. When I was thinking about the concept for this show, one of the very first episodes I thought of was The Blueprint, Superman the movie. And today I get to finally speak about the film that not only started off all of Superman on film, but also the film that basically set the archetype for all of superhero cinema as we know it. But, of course, before we get to today's main topic, we have to get to the Superman on film update for this week related to James Gunn's Superman. And it's been a doozy of a week since episode 2. We've gotten a lot new information. We also had San Diego Comic-Con, which is currently emanating out of San Diego this week, and I'm recording this on Sunday morning, so it is still actively happening. But thankfully, DC Studios is not having a very large presence, and they already made their key announcements, so I'll be able to react to those momentarily. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about the news that came out before Comic-Con even started, because we found out last week that Nicholas Hoult, that's right, Mr. Lex Luthor himself, Nicholas Hoult, has wrapped production. He has wrapped principal photography on Superman. James Gunn took to Instagram to share the wrap gift that Nicholas had gotten him. He gave him a special collector's comic book featuring Brainiac and Lex and a tiny miniature Superman in a cage dangling between them, a classic issue of a Superman comic as a wrap gift to his director. And in that post is where James Gunn revealed that Nicholas Hoult has indeed wrapped filming. But it didn't end there, because you see, there was a fan who, when he saw this, he made an assumption about what this meant regarding Nicholas Hoult's Lex Luthor. And well, here's what James Gunn said. His answer was very illuminating. Check this out. The assumption was, the fan said, Nick is done filming his scenes, but the whole movie isn't done yet. That only means Luthor may just be the villain who hides in the shadow, the mastermind in this movie, and not the main villain who Superman will fight. At which point, James responded, no, Lex is the primary villain. We only have a few days left of shooting. Only 2 actors left. Look at that. In just those 3 sentences, we learned 3 very crucial things. And one of them is kind of a major one if you think about it, because basically since the outset of this project, between online scuttlebutt and little teases and artwork that James Gunn himself posted early on when he was sharing some of his initial DC imagery that seemed to be exciting him. He was sharing stuff from Alex Ross. He was sharing stuff from various different publications. And one of the things he shared was a piece of Brainiac art. And that got a lot of people thinking maybe we're finally going to get Brainiac as a main villain. And then when you saw the official image that was first released of David Corenswet putting on the boots and getting ready to go do a job for Superman, you see this big crazy cosmic thing over the Metropolis skyline, and a lot of people thought maybe that is something to do with Brainiac. But no. If we are to believe James Gunn's comments this past week, Brainiac is not our primary villain. Lex Luthor is himself. And honestly, if I'm being honest, that may be the first disappointing bit of news I've heard about this movie, because I was very excited to get a bunch of things that we've never seen before, and boy, oh boy, have we seen Lex Luthor before. But On the other hand, I'm going to try to give this the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to see how this plays out, because I know there's a lot more going on in this film, and he's not going to be fighting some kind of a super Lex inside of a robot suit or anything like that. So I assume there will be other villains, but James Gunn is essentially saying that Lex is the primary antagonist, and that anything that Superman has to face in this film is going to be because of Lex Luthor's doing. But with that in mind, I do kind of feel like the poster maybe just had everything in reverse. I think rather than Lex being the mastermind behind everything, I think Lex is the primary villain in this, but it's Brainiac who's the one lurking in the shadows. It'll be Brainiac who we find that's maybe been sending messages to Lex, urging him to rid the Earth of this Kryptonian scum. Maybe we're going to find out in a post-credit sequence that it's Brainiac from the cosmos who's been the puppet master, sending to Earth all the different things Lex would need to try and stop Kal-El. And since he fails, that's what brings Brainiac to the forefront in a sequel. There's lots of different ways to go with this, but I have a feeling that maybe we all had it in reverse. We thought Brainiac would be front and center here and Lex would be a more background player, but I think all this time it's going to be the long game with Brainiac. We're not going to get him in movie one. We're going to get teases of him, but we're going to build to him. And when you think about it, it does make a lot of sense, right? It does. It is good to kind of, stretch it out a little bit. Brainiac is a major intergalactic cosmic villain with huge ramifications, and he could have huge ramifications on the entire DC universe. So let's not, blow our load on movie one, right? Let's give ourselves something to look forward to a little later on. So Lex is our primary villain. But what else was in that phrase? What else was in that response that James Gunn said? He said that there's only 2 actors left filming. There's only 2 actors left, and that's notable because a day later, they wrapped another one. That's right. A day later, there was the wrapping of Maria Gabriela. What's her name? I want to get this right because I can actually say it right. Maria Gabriela Faria wrapped as the engineer the very following day. So if we are to believe that, that means now there's only 1 actor left on the film. And that means also that the production really is about to conclude, which is crazy to think. We've gone from when are we going to get a Superman movie into production to this Superman movie is about to enter post-production. So if Nicholas wrapped, leaving only 2, and then Maria Gabriela de Faria wrapped the next day, that leaves only 1. And we haven't heard anything about our Superman himself, Mr. David Corenswet, rapping, have we? So I have a feeling he's probably the final actor on set filming something, and he's probably going to be rapping any day now. What a thought. What a thought to think that we're actually here, where there is a Superman movie that is ready to enter the next phase of production. I mean, what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. But now let's go ahead and talk about what's going on this weekend with San Diego Comic-Con. Because there were a couple of things, not a huge DC footprint at this year's show. And we'll get into a little bit of why. Peter Safran did kind of reveal why they kind of played certain things close to the vest, even though Superman is really rather far along in its filming. But what we did get, oh boy, we got our first look at the official brand new DC Studios logo. And I know it's kind of silly to be getting excited about something like a logo, but have you seen it? Have you seen what they brought back for us? Because they unveiled at San Diego Comic-Con that DC Studios is bringing back the classic DC Bullet. That's right, the original DC logo that was playing in the 80s and 90s, the one that was on all the comics from the 80s and 90s, the DC logo of my childhood is now going to be the primary emblem for DC Studios. So yes, for those of us who grew up with the DC Bullet as our gateway into DC Comics, this is huge to see that back. So yes, we've got a new logo. Also, at Comic-Con, we got to see our first look at some merch. That's right, there was the very first unveiling of official Superman logo shirts featuring the James Gunn Superman Kingdom Come style Superman logo on the chest. So you know I got to pick me up one of those, but I've also got an issue with it. I don't know why they did this, and I hope the official ones that are available for mass release don't include this detail. But if you look closely at the t-shirts that have gone on sale, which, by the way, all sold out immediately. Within 48 hours of Comic-Con, almost all the Superman merch was gone. So what does that say about the interest in the return of the king? But what I don't like about the shirt is that it keeps that little glow that's on the center line. If you look at the original logo, there's this almost like a solar flare that seems to be coming through the center of the S. It's like a glow. And look, it looks nice. It's artistic. It's a stylistic thing. It gave the impression of, solar Superman receiving the light, being powerful. But on the shirt itself, having that just be a permanent part of the logo, that little glow, I don't really care for that one bit. So I'm hoping when they release the official shirts, that little glow light thing is not part of it. But, that's just my little quibble. Also at Comic-Con, we got our first look at the Creature Commandos trailer. My personal response to that, well, it didn't do a heck of a lot for me, I'll tell you that much. It looked basically like an animated Suicide Squad. And honestly, we've gotten a lot of these kind of, quirky team comes together and becomes an unlikely success story. And, we've seen two different versions of the Suicide Squad on the big screen, right? We saw James Gunn already do Guardians 1, 2, and 3. For those of us who watched Doom Patrol, we saw that kind of dynamic there. Like, at this point, it's become very, very well-trod territory to have a bunch of seemingly totally different kinds of characters have to come together and do some kind of unlikely mission. And honestly, when I saw the trailer, I'm like, this just looks like, Task Force X, the animated series. I know that the creature element of it, the fact that they're all, apparently the big twist here is that now Amanda Waller can't use humans, but she can use other things on her task force. Yeah, I get like that gimmick is supposed to make this feel new and fresh and different, but it doesn't really do that for me. It just feels like an animated Suicide Squad. So listen, I'll check it out, especially because it is the official launch of the DCU. It is the first official project from DC Studios, and it's coming out a full 7 months before Superman comes out. So yes, this December, will I be checking out the Creature Commandos? Yes. But did that trailer make me go, oh my God, I have to see that right now? No, it didn't. We also got a trailer for Superman and Lois. The final season is coming up, and we got our first real look at Superman and Lois. And I should say it's not necessarily a trailer. We did get like a little pre-look, a minute and 15-second little teaser, but we actually got like a 3-minute exclusive sneak peek at Superman versus Doomsday at San Diego Comic-Con. So we got a couple of different bits of media from the upcoming season of the show. And if I've never said it here, which I don't think I have, this is a new show. I've never said this on this show, but Superman and Lois is the very best Superman adaptation we have received in decades. To me, the last live-action Superman adaptation that had me as fully invested as Superman and Lois has would be Superman 2 in the 80s, Okay, it's been a long time since there's been live action Superman media that really takes the character into the future, shows things we've never seen before, puts the character in a position that we've never gotten to see him in before, and reinvents his mythology in a way that is new, exciting, but respects the past. So Superman and Lois to me is like the gold standard for live action Superman adaptations right now. So when that show comes back, I do plan on launching some post-show live streams after the episodes. And I just want to let you guys know that because I have been wanting to try the live aspect of this StreamYard platform that I've got. I've gotten to participate in some wonderful live streams in the past, and I've always thought I would love to do one of those. And I would love to have, fellow geeks come on and have a little panel post-show, breakdown of Superman and Lois. I'd love to be able to have, listeners and viewers and readers be able to live comment while we're streaming, and I could answer questions and all that kind of stuff then. So yes, Superman and Lois is coming at the end of October, and along with it will be Superman and Lois post-show live streams right here on the Superman on Film YouTube channel. So I hope that you subscribe. But okay, now we got Superman and Lois at Comic-Con. Oh, and let me just say, it looks great. We knew that they were heading towards Superman versus Doomsday at the end of season 3, and they arrived at it in a very cool, unique way. Once again, we're not getting perhaps the traditional Doomsday, but we're getting a very interesting version of him. And I have faith. These writers, these creators, the producers of Superman and Lois have given me lots to have faith in. And the battle between them, again, I don't know where CW's getting all this money, but it looks like the investment of chopping down the number of episodes has paid off because we are getting a 2-hour season premiere, and the effects and the overall production value, it looks like we're basically getting a Superman movie when the season premiere arrives in October. So I'm very excited for that. I'm a little bummed that the season is only 10 episodes. I'm very bummed that this is the end of this era because I think Tyler Hoechlin and I think Bitsy Tulloch have given us just iconic, phenomenal versions of these characters that we're very lucky as fans to have been able to get. And that many of us initially overestimated or we were initially very kind of skeptical of, I should say, because it was the CW, because we had seen Tyler appear on Supergirl, and we thought, is this just going to be another weird paint by numbers, Party City costumed DC CW show? And instead we got the very best Superman TV show perhaps ever. So yes, I'm very excited for that. The teases that we've gotten so far look great. My only concern is it's only 10 episodes. And if we're doing the Death of Superman arc, and we're going to try to do a thing where, we're going to see him get killed off, we're going to see Steel rise up, we're going to see his son rise up as Supergirl, we're going to see like basically a reign of the Superman type of storyline. Listen, that's wonderful, and it gives me goosebumps. I can't wait to see it done right. But if we've only got 10 episodes, that means like in order to do that storyline right, you got to have a Superman who's off screen for a while, who's dead for several episodes, so that the supermen who rise up in his stead can do what they have to do and learn their tough lessons. But ultimately, we need the Man of Steel back. We have to get there. And it's like, if we've only got 10 episodes, does that mean we're only going to have like half a season that has Superman in it? You know what I mean? Are we going to see him basically get killed off in episode 1, and then we get 2, 3, 4 episodes without him? Because you have to feel the absence of Superman, right? You have to feel that loss and that death and that feeling that who's going to rise up and try to take his place and hold down the fort with him gone. So, if they're going to do this right, does this mean we're getting very little Superman in the final season of Superman and Lois? I hope not. I really hope not. But again, we shall see, and we'll be following it together in real time as the series unfolds, starting at the end of October. But okay, now, We got Superman and Lois, but we didn't get any Superman. And that might be a surprise for some of you. It was even kind of a surprise to me, to be honest. Because, look, a couple years back, Matt Reeves showed up to Comic-Con, and he had only filmed about around 40% of the Batman at the time. And this is before they had to halt production due to COVID and everything. But at the time, with only 40% of filming complete, he was able to create an amazing sizzle reel that had fans jumping around doing backflips. It gave a great taste of what was to come. And the movie that we eventually got 2 years later totally lived up to what that initial taste was like. So, listen, clearly they're just about wrapped with Superman. So there is a lot of footage in the can. And mind you, I know that there's a big difference between Superman and the Batman when it comes to post-production, because Superman's going to require a whole other level of post-production that the Batman didn't, especially because Matt Reeves' Batman is much more realistic, much more gritty, much more just, grounded and down to earth. A lot of it is more practical just in nature. So there's a lot less post. But with this Superman movie, you mean to tell me that with 98% of principal photography behind them, they couldn't come up with like a 45-second, 60-second little taste of what this movie is going to do for us, But it didn't happen. It didn't happen, but Peter Safran did go ahead and reveal why it didn't happen. Although, I don't know, again, this doesn't really take the sting off for me, because part of me is like, you still could have done this. You still absolutely could have pulled this off. But here's what Peter Safran explained to The Wrap when it came to why there's no Superman at Comic-Con this year. He said, from my perspective, it's just too soon. A year is truthfully a long time for a campaign, and so from our perspective, I think we go stronger and harder over a shorter period rather than stretching it out. That's our instinct on that. Believe me, there's going to be no shortage of Superman in your life over the next 12 months. So, look, he's essentially discussing how they don't want to start the promotional campaign too soon. He wasn't even saying that we don't have any footage prepared or we couldn't come up with something. They're essentially taking the strategy, taking the tact that it's just too soon to start promoting this Superman movie. We have a whole year, don't worry. But, that just doesn't, we've done this before. There have been movies that have had a year and a half lead out of teases, and that still ended up being a success. So I don't necessarily agree with that instinct. If that was the instinct that he's referring to, I don't necessarily agree with it. But that's what he's saying. They want to have a shorter, tighter promotional schedule for Superman rather than drag it out for a year. And that's their story, and they're sticking to it. And this kind of makes me want to bring this up now. Because, look, through 2 episodes and through 23 minutes of this show here, this episode now, I've been pretty much nothing but positive when it comes to James Gunn's Superman. I'm very, I really am just genuinely super hyped. I believe, I have bought in, I am ready, okay? But I think it's only fair that I also balance that out, because I do have some concerns. There are just a couple of key things when it comes to Gunn's directorial style that make me concerned and have made me concerned from the outset of him being signed on. Because originally, he was not my pick for Superman. He was never even on my radar for Superman. And not because I didn't respect him, not because I didn't think he brought the goods. Granted, the first Guardians movie, I had to watch a couple of times to really finally appreciate what he was going for there. The second one, I've always thought had a lot of great potential, but kind of got overstuffed and blown out of proportion in the third act. And I still kind of feel like he lost his way a little bit there in that one. And then the third film, I thought was pretty good. Not as good as everyone else said, but I thought it had good emotional beats and all that. But it wasn't like an instant classic, give this guy whatever he wants kind of movie for me. And honestly, it was the Suicide Squad that made me go, okay, hold on. Mr. Gunn does seem to have something up his sleeve. He does seem to have something to say, and there's more of an edge to what he's willing to say over here in DC, where he's not signing checks that come from Disney. He seems to kind of be ready to like tell some real interesting stories. And then I saw Peacemaker, and I was totally like, wow, check this guy out. He is a real storyteller, because Peacemaker is not at all like Guardians. And yes, it has some absurdity, and it's a goofy, strange, hard R, extreme kind of show. But it was a different kind of animal entirely, and it had some heft to it. There was some subtext in there. There were things about America. There were things about heroism. There was things about toxic masculinity. There was all kinds of interesting elements that he worked into Peacemaker that made me go, okay, this guy's got some range. He's got a voice, and he wants to use it. But now, the things that I'm concerned about, and the reasons why I didn't think he was initially, he wouldn't have ever been on my short list, is this question of, can James Gunn play it straight? And what I mean by this is this. Through his projects that he's had the most success on, they've all kind of had a very sort of subversive, quirky energy to them. They're from the eyes of like a rebel. You could tell James has a more sort of offbeat, quirky sense of humor. And he likes the characters that are a little absurd, a little dry, a little strange. And he loves being able to like take all these zany characters and create situations where you get bought in and you will feel the feels and you'll go on the emotions with these wacky, quirky characters. But he always makes sure to like layer it with lots of like dark humor, lots of sarcasm. There'll be like some kind of a punchline right after a big dramatic revelation that kind of pulls the drama out of the dramatic revelation. Like he likes to kind of beat around the bush, but, bring kind of like, he brings the emotional stuff in a roundabout kind of way. He wraps it up in his own quirky, strange James Gunn style. But for Superman, you got to play it straight. Superman is not a quirky, subversive, zany character with a strange, hokey, out there, outlandish world that he is set in. Superman, he's a wholesome, heartfelt character. His stories have a sincerity and a tenderness to them. They wear their hearts on their sleeve. So while in Guardians and even in Peacemaker, you have these moments where you feel that verklempt, you get the lump in your throat and whatever, it's always like while dealing with something kind of absurd and out there. Like, you're watching Peacemaker get hugged by an eagle. And you're crying about it, but it's like, I'm looking at Peacemaker get hugged by an eagle, and this is moving me? Wow, how did you do that? He's like I said, he's good at making you feel the things in situations where you wouldn't normally feel them. But with Superman, you're supposed to normally feel the feels throughout the story. So my main thing is, can he play it straight? Can he tell a Superman story that is minimal on the dark humor, minimal on the type of stuff where like we're commenting on ourselves and we're kind of poking fun of this at the same time that we're doing it? Like Superman needs to just be sincere and heartfelt and true blue. So I am hoping that he can do that, but that is one of my concerns, because we haven't seen a James Gunn movie where he's played it straight the whole time. We've seen moments. If you think about like the first scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, when Peter's still a little boy and the mom is sick and there's the alien that comes to get him, the glowing lights outside, like that was very Superman. It felt almost very like Amblin Entertainment 80s, like family adventure type of movie. It was very, it had the feels. But then the rest of the movie really largely only went there in fleeting moments. And I kind of feel like a Superman movie needs to feel like the first scene of Guardians of the Galaxy, the whole time. So can he do it? We'll see. My other big concern when it comes to, James Gunn and his style is the music, because he's hired John Murphy to be his composer. And John Murphy's worked with him on, he worked with him on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. He worked with him on the Suicide Squad. So it's nice that they are simpatico. It's nice that they have a nice working relationship. Heck, I even loved what he said early on about how when he was initially writing the script, he shared pages with John Murphy, and Murphy came up with the Superman theme like right away, and that James would listen to that while writing the script. And like, it just seems like the theme that Murphy has constructed is rather important to the plot or to the feel of this movie. And I love that. That's how it should be, right? That sounds great. But what worries me is I've watched these movies that Murphy has scored for Gunn, and I have never once hummed any of what he composed once the movie was over. I couldn't tell you what one bar of music sounded like in any of those movies. To me, the score was always almost just more like ambient. Ooh, now it sounds scary because it's a scary scene. Now it sounds triumphant because we're happy. But like, it almost felt like TV scoring. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like grand orchestral symphonic motifs and score where you're like, whoa, there's the Peter Quill theme. Oh, there's the, DC has always mopped the floor with Marvel when it comes to score. And with him hiring his same Marvel dude, and the fact that they did the Suicide Squad together, and I couldn't tell you an ounce of music from that worries me. It does. And especially because, we love James Gunn. We know that James Gunn loves his needle drop type of stuff. He loves putting real songs into the movies that, heighten the scenes and convey how a character's feeling using actual pre-existing songs. And listen, I appreciate that. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack as much as anyone. And I love what he was going for there, especially because as a kid, I was a kid who received mixtapes as love letters from one of my parents. So I totally I get it. I love it. But I hope the score shines through this time. If we get a needle drop type of song moment, let it only happen once or twice. Please, let's not have an entire soundtrack or movie dominated by songs we've heard already. I want a grand symphonic score. I want a theme that is the Superman theme. I want a motif that's the Clark motif. I want Lois to have her own little melody. I want Perry White to have his own melody. I want Lex Luthor to have his own melody. And if you go back through DC traditionally, that's how it's always been. Going back to Superman the movie and on, we've always gotten these masterful scores where if you close your eyes, you can picture the movie. You know the scenes. You know who's talking by the little melody that's playing. DC's just always had that. And James Gunn's movies, especially the ones he's done now with John Murphy, they've never had a score that meant anything to anyone. So that's why, to me, I have my concerns about James Gunn and John Murphy and the score. So let's see. Those are my two big things. Can he play it straight, and will the score matter? Those are my two big question marks for Mr. James Gunn. But all right, that does it for the current events portion of this episode. Let's go ahead and start talking about Superman the movie. Let's talk about the blueprint. Now, when it comes to Superman the movie, there's lots of different angles we could discuss. There's lots of different things to talk about, and thankfully, this is a Superman on film podcast, so there will be episodes dedicated to all different aspects of the movie, be it the making of the movie, be it what went on between Richard Donner and the producers, the Salkinds, throughout it that got him fired and replaced by Richard Lester and had Superman 2 hastily reshot and all that. But there will be episodes based on all these different elements of the film. For today, I really wanted to focus on the film's lasting legacy. about how this film became the blueprint for everything that came afterward. That's going to be the primary focus of today's discussion on Superman the movie. Because you see, back in 1978, when that film came out, it did something no other film had ever even tried to do. It tried to make you take superheroes and comic books seriously. It tried to get you to really care and invest in this super far-fetched world. And that may sound, nowadays in 2024, we're used to taking these films seriously. But back in 78, that was not the norm. In fact, when Mario Puzo was selling his script and shopping it around town and trying to get a Superman movie made, the initial script had a lot more in common with what had come before, like Adam West's Batman and Robin in the 1960s, a show that was much more campy, much more corny, and felt mainly like a cartoon come to life. The primary way that we had ever ingested superheroes was strictly as children's entertainment. And these outlandish, over-the-top worlds with ridiculous villains and a very cheeky, overly comedic, light-hearted sensibility. But in the 70s, when Puzo was trying to get that movie made, Richard Donner got a look at that and hired creative consultant Tom Mankiewicz to completely kind of overhaul that, because the initial script had stuff like celebrity cameos. They were going to have Telly Savalas in there as his TV character Kojak, sucking on a lollipop and looking up at the sky and saying one of his zingy one-liners at Superman. Like, it was going to be Adam West Batman all over again. The initial vision for Superman the movie was for something that felt sillier and campier and much more childish than what we got. But that's why what Richard Donner and Tom Mankiewicz did has meant so much to an entire generation, or I should say generations of filmmakers that have come since. So that's why we have to talk about its influence. We have to talk about the fact that all of the modern maestros that we consider the people who have gotten the superhero genre right in the last 20 plus years, they've all in some way either flat out referenced Richard Donner's Superman or have made their influences so clear in their films that there's no questioning where they got their ideas on tone and pacing and how to portray these kinds of characters. And one of the things that they did that automatically set this film apart from anything that had come before and anything that could have possibly come after is Tom Mankiewicz specifically sought out to make the film feel like three different movies in one. He said one way to make this all feel much more grand and much more mythological, make it all a much just bigger deal than just here's a guy flying around, is we're going to make Krypton feel like its own place. If you go back and watch the film, Krypton feels like Shakespeare. It is the language is different. The way the acting and the performances are handled is totally different than anything else we see in the film. Everything feels classic, yet alien and different. Then we come to Smallville, and everything kind of shifts. The tone suddenly becomes like Happy Days. It becomes very Americana. It becomes very Frank Capra. It becomes very just classic, Americana. And then we get to Smallville, and you got the hustle and bustle of the city, and you have a more rat-a-tat dialogue, and you have these larger-than-life kind of very New York City type figures, walking around saying very New York City-esque things. And, that part of the movie feels totally original unto itself. The film really has this very expansive, very ambitious scope where we're going to take you from the depths of the cosmos. We're going to take you to the beautiful prairie lands of America, and then we're going to take you to the hustle and bustle of the big city, and we're going to show you this epic story of this alien orphan who comes here from a distant land, who will never be one of us, but is here to protect us and is here to be our friend. The way the whole thing was handled, was just, it was beautiful, it was serious, and it handled the mythology like it was something grand, like it was something you should believe in, like it was something you should buy into. And it's not that crazy to think that what if someone came here like that? Because the world itself didn't feel that crazy. It felt in a lot of ways like a world that was familiar to us. Once we got to Earth, Smallville felt like a small town in America. It didn't feel like like they were making fun of small towns in America. And Metropolis felt like the big bustling city where we need a Superman to come save us because there's bad guys around every corner wanting to mug you in an alleyway. They really they gave us this whole broad, fascinating world to let Superman react to things and let us see what he thinks of mankind and let us see what kind of humans he gravitates towards and what inspires him to be Superman. The film throughout those 2.5 hours, it's a pretty lengthy film at that. It really takes you on this journey that's not just some kid's story about a guy who can lift heavy things and fly around and say snappy one-liners to his villains. They gave us a full-on epic storyline with a vulnerable hero because, let's not forget, the way Christopher Reeve played Superman was unbelievable. Because here you had a character where the bullets bounce off his chest. He can pick up anything. He is the most powerful being on Earth. And yet Reeve, through his portrayal, through his eyes, always conveyed a vulnerability. There was always like a bit of a sadness. You could see his other weakness was not, we know about kryptonite, but his other biggest weakness, the other place that you can hurt Superman, is his heart. And Reeve always kind of made that front and center too. The emotions of the character, his concern for us, his love for Lois, his concern in general made him vulnerable because he cared so much it would destroy him if anything bad happened on his watch. And that, that approach to the character and the way Reeve played it, because think about it. If you're playing essentially a demigod, you could play the power of that. You could play the strong badass that cannot be taken down aspect of that. But to play the opposite of that, to play his softness, to play his gentleness instead of his strength, that was a bold choice. And Richard Donner had a hand in that because directors, they direct their actors. So I'm sure he pushed for that. But that's why, like, that whole film, the way it all unfolds, the chemistry between the actors, the goal of the director and the writers, it was such a breathtaking change of pace for the superhero genre up to that point, that from that point on, everyone wanted to make a superhero movie that felt like that. And the ones who didn't have a lot of success. That's why for the next, many, many years, nobody touched Superman the movie because no one could quite get that magical equation just right. And look, I know Batman had a lot of success starting in 1989. That was the other big superhero franchise between Superman and Spider-Man in the year 2000 that really got the entire world excited about superheroes. But you know what? Check out what Christopher Nolan, the Dark Knight trilogy's Christopher Nolan, said about Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, as well as how Dick Donner's Superman strongly influenced his Dark Knight trilogy, and especially getting things started with Batman Begins. And this quote is a wonderful example, by the way, of what lessons different filmmakers learned from Superman the movie, because you'll find that there are lots of films inspired by Superman that don't necessarily feel or look or act much like a Superman movie. But in this quote from Nolan, you're going to see which aspects of what Donner did impacted him as well as generations of other filmmakers. So in a in an interview where he was asked about, taking on the Batman assignment and talking about how initially, when he was pitched the project, the people that were pitching it didn't think he would be interested because he was more of an auteur at the time. He had done that Memento, he had done Insomnia. It seemed like he was more of a serious filmmaker, and the idea of him doing a Batman reboot a few years after Batman and Robin essentially killed that franchise, they didn't think he would be interested. But here's what he said. He said, well, actually, that is something I'm interested in, because one of the great films that I am very influenced by that we haven't talked about was Dick Donner's Superman. 1978 that came out. It made a huge impression on me. I can remember the trailers for it. I can remember about Superman the movie, all of that. And it was very clear to me that however brilliant, and it was very brilliant, Tim Burton's take on Batman was in 1989, and it was obviously a worldwide smash, it wasn't that sort of origin story. It wasn't that real world kind of epic movie. It was very Tim Burton, a very idiosyncratic, gothic kind of masterpiece. But it left this interesting gap in pop culture, which is, we had Superman in 1978, but they never did that sort of 1978 Batman, where you see the origin story, where the world is pretty much the world we live in, but there's this extraordinary figure there, which is what works so well in Dick Donner's Superman. And so I was able to get in the studio and say, well, that's what I would do with it. So that right there, the fact that the big thing for him was that we get an origin story where the world is pretty much the world we live in, but there's this extraordinary figure there. That was the thing that made him go, this is how I can tackle Batman, And he went on to say, too, because they were talking just further, and he said, what I loved about Superman was the way New York felt like New York, or rather Metropolis felt like New York. Metropolis felt like a city you could recognize. And then there was this guy flying through the streets. That's amazing. So let's do that for Batman, and let's start by putting together an amazing cast, which is what they had done with that film, but which I hadn't seen done since. They had everybody from Marlon Brando to Glenn Ford to Gene Hackman playing Superman's dad. It was an incredible cast. So we started putting together this amazing cast based around Christian, who seemed perfect for Batman, but bringing him Sir Michael Caine and Gary Oldman and Morgan Freeman and Tom Wilkinson. It was just incredible. And yes, that's another thing that made this film so unique. This was not child's play. Before Christopher Reeve had ever even been cast, they already were advertising Marlon Brando, Marlon Brando, who was already one of the most beloved, respected, legendary actors in Hollywood for a long time at this point. The Godfather himself. They had him on the posters for Superman, and they had Gene Hackman, who was also already just top form, A-list, beloved figure in Hollywood. They had their names on the posters for Superman before Reeve was even a thing. So right out of the gate, there was this air of prestige around the project, because if you're going to get these top line actors, and there were more, like Nolan mentioned, you had Glenn Ford, you had Susanna York. I mean, you had just a phenomenal cast of actors from all these different walks of life coming to bring their prestige and their talent to this project, which could have, again, been treated like kid stuff. And right out of the gate, that cast told you, this is not kid stuff. And yeah, when you look at Batman Begins, he did the same thing. He created an all-star supporting cast. So you may not know Christian Bale, just like you didn't really know Christopher Reeve. But when you see all these heavy hitters around him, it instantly levels up the whole production. It instantly makes you think a little higher of this than you would of anything else. And, the influence of that cannot be overstated. And it's funny to think, too, there was a time when actors were a little bit like, I don't know if I want to do a superhero movie. This is a little, might be beneath me. But now when you think about the last 20 years, right? Can you think of an actor who hasn't been in some kind of a superhero movie, right? It's funny how that all has flipped. But at the time, it was groundbreaking to get serious actors from serious beloved projects to sign on to do a movie about a guy flying around in a big red cape. That just didn't happen in the 70s. So the influence of that, I think, is worth noting. And while Christopher Nolan has gone on the record of pointing this out, there are other auteurs over time that have brought up the Donner influence. Back when the X-Men movies were hot and doing a thing, Bryan Singer was very quick to point out that he looked at Superman the movie as his goalpost while making the first two movies. When it came to Sam Raimi's Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, you could see the Superman influences all over those films, especially in the first two, where it just seemed like he was almost like echoing Superman moments in his Spider-Man movie, which kind of pissed me off at the time too, because I'm like, dude, this is Spider-Man. This isn't Superman. Spider-Man doesn't do the shirt rip while running across an alley. What are you doing? But either way, Sam Raimi also, and aside from Nolan and Singer and Raimi, we also have arguably the most successful superhero producer of all time. Marvel Studios' Kevin Feige refers to Superman the movie as its gold standard. He's gone on the record as saying that before they start any new movies, before they begin any new projects at Marvel, they watch Superman the movie. So what does that tell you, ladies and gents? That film, it is the blueprint. Everything we've seen after it has in some way been impacted by it. And that doesn't mean that everything that it has inspired has been good, right? It still takes a good filmmaker to take what inspired him and actually adapt it well, right? Because when Singer had his chance to tell his Superman story, there were lots of mistakes made, right? And we're going to get to that when we get to the Superman Returns episode of this show. So just being influenced by it doesn't mean it's any good, right? And if you think about the Marvel cinematic output, they've made, 35 movies at this point, something like that. And I think fewer than 10 have been worth anything, really. Many of them are mildly amusing and entertaining and fizzy popcorn fun for what they are. But very few have become that instant classic that stands the test of time. There will only ever be one Superman the movie, And it's funny to think, too, like Patty Jenkins, who did the two Wonder Woman movies, also very clearly inspired by Dick Donner's Superman. You could feel its influence across both of her movies, both of her Wonder Woman movies. And if you ask me, the best modern adaptation of the Donner formula, the best, is the first Wonder Woman. The first Wonder Woman really, it carries that spirit through very, very nicely. You have that true blue hero at the center of it all, who's always doing the right thing, is always concerned about being helpful and being right, even if it puts her in a bad position. And then you have the beginning of the film where Themyscira is almost like Krypton, where everyone is speaking in Old English, and it feels like you're watching an old Greek epic. Right? And then when she comes to London, it's a totally different kind of story. And you got pollution and cars and ice cream. And, it feels totally different than the world that we had just met on Themyscira. And it had those same little beats of humor from time to time. It had a great supporting cast. Honestly, the cast is probably the one area where, Patty Jenkins probably could have done a little better. Everyone did great. But there were very few big Hollywood A-listers in this one. So that's the one area where they probably dropped the ball a little bit on the Donner influence. But in terms of tone, in terms of the focus of the story, in terms of the message of love and the overall purpose of what that movie was about and trying to get us, to feel, Wonder Woman to me is the best modern day adaptation of the Donner formula. But now the next thing I want to talk about with Superman the movie has to do with the score, because that's another area where John Williams' score for Superman really, to this day, has set such a high bar that very few composers and very few superhero films have been able to touch it. And I can't even think about how many composers I've read interviews from who all say that soundtrack, like they sat there in front of a record player and listened to that vinyl over and over again. And that's what made them want to go into being composers. That's what made them want to score movies. You know, that score, for those of you who have never taken the time to sit down and really listen to it, if you only really know the March or the Planet Krypton theme, like you ain't living right. You know, I remember as a kid and through my teen years, like I would listen to the soundtrack and I would literally just visualize the scenes, because you could hear from the different changes in the music, you could hear and feel everything that was going on in the movie. John Williams did just an extraordinary job. And look, I know we've gone on to say, you know, some people feel his work is a little overrated, that you could hum many John Williams themes and they could kind of flow directly into each other because he had a certain lane when it came to certain kinds of compositions he created. But I don't care. I don't care. The Superman score is hands down one of the greatest film scores of all time, and it sets the bar so high that it's one of the reasons why I'm concerned about John Murphy. It's one of the reasons why, like, I wish we'd gotten someone who we already know can make things that are iconic and stand the test of time. And there's very few of those in modern times. You know, we got lucky in Man of Steel, right? We got Hans Zimmer, and he created something original and beautiful for Superman in Man of Steel. I loved all the music in that film. And that kept the streak going of DC always knowing how important the score is, while Marvel doesn't seem to have any idea what they're doing over there. So, you know, we don't have Hans Zimmer this time. And we don't have John Williams this time. We have John Murphy. So, Mr. Murphy, I hope you are ready to rise to the challenge, because John Williams set the bar really high and people are still trying to surpass it. And I'm not really particularly sure anybody has ever passed it, because there's very few things like the Superman the movie soundtrack. Now, another thing that it's set in stone for Superman that I find interesting, and that it became a big debate point among Superman fans when Superman Returns came out in 2006, was that if you go back and watch Superman the movie, this was a superhero movie about a super-powered man who didn't punch a thing. There were like no fight scenes practically. You know, you see him take down some bad guys and apprehend them, and little bits of physical confrontation, but you never see Superman getting all, tough and beating anyone up and kicking or punching or throwing anybody or anything. You mainly see Superman saving people, as if that is the main reason we go see a Superman movie. And honestly, to me, that really is the purpose of a Superman story. We have action hero superheroes. You want to see someone fight and have cool gadgets and beat up thugs and tie people up and do all that. Watch Batman. You go check out Spider-Man. There's lots of heroes. We're watching them beat up the bad guys and use their abilities. That is one of the main things you love to do with them. But with Superman, it's always been about the saves. We want to see who's in trouble and how can Superman save them. And how is he going to do it in a way that, makes them learn something from it afterward. There's usually like a line he says afterward to whoever he captures, or there's some encouraging word he says to the person who was captured. He's always it's been about how he saves you and how he makes you feel better, not about how strong and cool and powerful he is. A core Superman story tends to focus in on that. And Bryan Singer did adapt that part rather well in Superman Returns, because once again, very little action. He just throws New Krypton into the sky at a certain point, and that is the biggest action part of the third act. You know, we have a brief little save montage of him flying around Metropolis, but by and large, not a lot of action, no major combat. And at the time, that made people feel like this was a lame Superman movie. And I think it put us on the march from 2006 to 2013. It put us on the march towards a Superman movie where the action actually overloaded the narrative, where Man of Steel felt like, okay, since Superman Returns, everyone said it was slow and plodding and needed action, and they really wanted to see Superman punch something. Here's Man of Steel that's going to have like a 45-minute destruction extravaganza, and it's going to be Dragon Ball Z with demigods punching each other through the skies and buildings collapsing and all of this nonsense, really. And that is an area where, you know, I discussed in the first episode of this show how Man of Steel took way too many cues from Superman 1 and 2. But one area where it should have taken its cues was that you don't need to have all of that destruction for a Superman story. A real Superman fan isn't here for the glowing red eyes. A real Superman fan doesn't want to see him punch someone through 3 skyscrapers. A real Superman fan wants to see someone falling off of a roof and Superman being 7 miles away in the middle of something scary, but realizing I have to get over there and save this person. Like, that's the tension of a Superman story. How can he save as many people as possible? Not how hard can he hit things. And Superman the movie set that bar for Superman as well. And it's something that I hope James Gunn takes a lead from. Because look, there's a lot about this upcoming Superman movie where it seems like, you know, he's going to honor the past. There is a character named Eve Tessmacher in this movie, okay? Tessmacher was a movie creation. So if we're going to have a Tessmacher character here, clearly he's looking at the original film a little bit. If you look at his suit, you know, we're bringing back the red trunks. We're bringing back the primary colors. He's hired an actor who went to the same school as Reeve. So clearly, you know, Gunn, he's going to be drawing plenty of inspiration from that first movie. I just hope he also learned that Superman doesn't have to punch anything. That we don't need some big world-destroying third act where now he's going to fight some big CG villain and now we get to see him unleash all his powers. Like, that has always been the least interesting part of Superman to me. And it seemed like also to Richard Donner and also to Bryan Singer, for better or worse. But when it comes to Superman, I just hope James Gunn has learned that lesson and we don't get a film that suddenly just devolves into chaos the way Guardians 2 did. Even the Suicide Squad, you know, when they're all fighting the giant Starro at the end and they're, you know, it's just like I hope we don't get that very cliche third act. You know, because that's also the area where Wonder Woman also did flub up, right? They adapted Dick Donner real well, but then that third act got real kind of a little hokey and dumb and over the top and overblown. So, again, James, if you're watching this, we want a third act where Superman is struggling to save as many lives as possible, not trying his best to uppercut someone into outer space and leapfrog over a fuel tanker that blows up a parking garage and leaves cars raining out of the sky while pedestrians are hiding mere feet away. We don't want that, okay? We want a Superman who cares. That's the most important part. And that's one of the things that Superman the movie got well. And you know what? If you want to say that nobody wants that and everyone wants a Superman movie that is filled to the brim with action, listen to me. adjusted for inflation, Superman the movie is still the number one Superman movie of all time. It is still in the top 100 top grossing movies of all time. That's right. If you adjust it for inflation in today's ticket prices, you take Superman 1978 and it is still the most successful Superman movie that has ever come out. Okay? And that says a lot. Because we've had many other Superman movies since. We've had movies that have been a part of this superhero revolution where all of a sudden everyone is obsessed with superheroes and we got big budgets and everyone is on the edge of their seat to see the latest comic book movies. And yet this little old movie from 1978 still has not been topped. So if you think that kind of movie wouldn't work, quite honestly, you're wrong. And hopefully James Gunn knows that. Hopefully his production partner, Peter Safran, knows that. And hopefully when we get James Gunn's Superman next year, it has a lot more in common with Superman the movie than it does with Man of Steel. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That does it for this week's Superman on Film. Hopefully you enjoyed episode 3 and this look at the blueprint Superman the movie and its enduring legacy and its influence on other superhero films, as well as hopefully its influence on James Gunn's movie. If you have not yet, please take time to like, rate, subscribe, and review the show, because it really makes a big difference. Over this past week, I've been occasionally just searching the term Superman on Apple Podcasts, and this here show, even though it is brand new, even though we've only had 2 episodes up to this point, it has been within the top 8 hits, and even at time top 3, and for a day it was the number 1 hit for Superman. And when you type Superman, the first autocomplete that Apple Podcasts suggests to you is the Superman on Film podcast. So thank you to everyone who's made the launch of this show such a success so far. And since I do like to read my reviews online, I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of the ones that have come in. All right, let's do this. So right before last week's episode, I probably could have gotten this in on episode 2, but I missed it. So check this one out that came in from Roachy Lad. Roachy Lad said, Superman is back, baby. 5 stars. If hope, optimism, and kindness are the focus of the DCU's new Superman, I can't think of a better brand ambassador than MFR. Mario's genuine love and excitement for Superman on Film shines. His takes are fair and honest, and his banter is always interesting and insightful. I hope James Gunn and Peter Safran, in all of their free time, are listening. Thank you, Roachy Lad. I know who that is, Mr. Roach. Thank you very much for that review. And then there was also this one here from Batman SRW. It says, MFR is back. Howdy, everyone. Shane here. I've been following Mario's podcasts since the start. And not to get too cheesy here, but they've gotten me through some rough times in my life. It has always been an escape when I flip on the podcast and venture into comic and movie land with a friend. That's what a podcast should be, an escape. My wife doesn't even know your name or the podcast name, but she knows your voice because of car rides, listening in the office while working, or whatever. The point is, I know this podcast celebrates the return of Superman to the big screen. But for me, it's also celebrating the return of a friend. To this day, I still smile every time I hear life is chaos, be kind. Thank you, Shane. Really, you have no idea what that review did to me, because see, my wife has a relationship like that with certain podcasters. There are certain podcasters I've listened to over the years where she doesn't know their name, she doesn't know what the show is, but she knows their voice and she knows their opinions on things. And yeah, so for me, like, to think that I am that for your wife or for anybody's partners out there that they've heard this droning voice all these years, first of all, apologize to her for me. But really, that really touched me. That really moved me. And it's a testament that I guess I should keep this up. I should really keep this up, because some of you say stuff that's just like, whenever one of you says that I got you through tough times and I've been there for you at low points in your life, I mean, that's incredible. So thank you. Thank you. And there's another one. This one's short and sweet, from Worth Listening To on Apple Podcasts. He says, "This guy gets it. So glad I found this show to hold me over until July 2025. Thank you, Worth Listening To. I'm glad you found me also. So if you are new, please subscribe. If you've been listening for a while but have never left a review, or if you left a review on the Fanboy podcast, now you can pay it forward and keep it going and do a nice review here on the Superman on Film podcast feed. Would you do that for me? Would you be so kind? But all right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3 of the Superman on Film podcast. And until next week, life is chaos. Be kind. Up, up and away.